happy to have you guys here. We're going to take just a quick group photo in a minute of all the speakers, and then we're going to go ahead and get started.
Oh, we got to do a photo. Where does the photo happen? That's like, do you want your badge on for it? All right. Wait, I'm going to take my badge off, sorry. Would you mind if I just hold back? Yes, of course. Permission. Thank you. Thank you. No, it looks good. I took mine off just because they didn't have theirs on.
No, that makes sense.
Like,
I look like I'm.
Should I have my badge on for now?
No, no badges. No badges. Oh gosh. Okay, here we go.
Oh, this is good.
Okay, we are here for a 10 a.m. panel. So I'm assuming that most of you were not out until 2 or 3 a.m. last night. Like the people that I'm sharing my Airbnb with, they came in all loud at 3 a.m. I was like, do you not know I have to work tomorrow? Welcome to this session. So we're going to talk about reverse engineering intelligence, and I was really excited to help lead this discussion because I think it's going to be one of the most interesting and unique conversations on the Croisette this year, and it's about the intersection of AI, neurodivergence, and sort of the workforce and the work that we live in. So, quick intro, I'm Tameka Kee. I am an advertising futurist. That means I spend all of my days and my nights thinking about how advertising is evolving and changing and how it changes us as people. And so I was really excited to have this discussion. I am going to give you each just a quick chance to just say who you are and tell us if you want to. Well, actually, I'm going to go back to this. So our industry turns everything, every identity, into a targeting segment. And so neurodivergence may be the next thing in line that's going to be targeting. And we're here to kind of talk about that. We're not here to sort of judge or even do it. And some of us up here may identify as neurodivergent. Nobody has to raise a hand, but if you want to, that's cool. And I just wanted to put that out there because we're not talking about this from a perspective of, oh, we are better than or less than or worse than, or we're sort of looking at it from this magnifying glass. Some of us might actually identify as that. I was, as a young child, diagnosed with ADD, and so I don't know if I consider myself neurodivergent now, but I do think I have a different mind. I'm going to turn it over to you, Elisabeth. Please tell us who you are and let us know about a little bit about you.
Thank you so much. I'm Elisabeth Bromberg. I am a brand and creative strategist, and I have ADHD. I was diagnosed 5 years ago when I turned 35. So like many women, I was diagnosed much later. Was not expecting it, was not seeking a diagnosis. Actually didn't fully believe it at first because, I was high functioning. But it's completely changed my perspective in terms of how I understand myself and also how I understand my career and what I'm good at. So, that's me. It's really exciting to be here. So thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Karen Bennett. I am at Jellyfish. I am based in the U.S., as you could probably tell by my voice. I do not personally identify as neurodivergent, but I do have a son who was recently, after a long time, diagnosed with ADHD. But I also am someone who really believes in thinking about empathy and respect and how we all meet each other, and we meet each other part way. And I think so much of our conversations today are going to revolve around communication, understanding each other, better understanding what people are coming to conversations with, and having an empathy around that.
I'm JC, running operations at Equativ. And I was, I guess, as a child, not really blending up until I was labeled as high intellectual potential, which is not actually neurodivergent, but it's still atypical enough that, so I'm only getting mostly the good signs, but I'm still not engaging with other humans exactly in the same way as a neurotypical person.
Alex Springer. I run a nonprofit standards body that is focused on transparency in AI systems and accountability and how they use content and reproduce that content to end users. I've spent a good amount of time in my career working on tech that also supports people who process information differently, which I know is not exactly a definition of neurodiversity, but I think is pretty close. And so in that kind of neurodiversity support and assessment work, it's been all about how we can use our tools to help people be able to access the information, content, be able to process, and to make better decisions. And I think this new tool obviously has some serious potential in that department.
So I love that the name of this session was around different minds, and the group that actually is helping underwrite this is called Different Minds. But if you notice, we each kind of talked about neurodivergence differently. Each of us said different words. We talked about how people think differently, and I think that's one of the first lenses that we look at this through is when you think about AI and the input of the person, the input of each user, then you think about the input of the data itself, we're gonna get lots of different definitions, lots of different outcomes. I wanna kick this off though with, the session is titled Reverse Engineering Intelligence. So what does that mean, and how are you using AI in your everyday work, neurodivergent or not? And this is a jump ball, anybody can hop in on this.
No one does. I'll take it. The truth is AI is embedded into everything we do. It is working throughout our entire systems, how we work with the clients. We believe AI is not human out of the loop. It is about humans using the tech, understanding how that tech is being used. So it's always human in the loop in the conversation, but it is throughout. It is generating creative, whether that is using a tool that we have called Pencil. It is about developing the insights that get to that creative with some of our other tools. So it really is throughout. There's nothing that we're doing where AI is not there, but there's also nothing that we're doing where humans are not enabling and driving that AI.
Yeah, no, but I guess I should have been a little bit more specific with my question. No, and that's helpful. But it's more like, how are you in your day-to-day personally actually using AI? Maybe just one example.
Okay. So I think a lot of the ways I'm using AI are to do the work that I'm like, oh, would lift off my brain, if that makes sense. Like I take notes from a client meeting and I say, make this note so that I can send it to a team member, versus me going and making all those notes accessible to someone, like able to read. And I'm like, oh, you just cleaned this up in a way that was my complete data dump as I ran through a meeting, and you organized it, someone else can read it, and it becomes something that is more democratized than what is just coming and flowing through me.
Elisabeth?
I'm really using AI kind of as a second brain. So I'm an external processor, and that means I'm either writing or I'm working out through what I'm saying verbally, what I'm thinking as I'm thinking. It's literally how I think, and that can be, especially when I'm with clients, or in a high stakes meeting, that isn't always a good thing. So how I'm using AI is I use it as a thought partner. I use it to really kind of like work out my ideas with me, to help kind of take the things that my brain is already kind of making abstract connections for, and help me kind of understand how to make them a little bit more concise and legible, both for myself and for my team or for my clients, or for whatever I'm doing. So that's really the biggest piece is I'm using it for execution, like of course, very much similar to you. Yeah. Like I've used it, for transcripts and meeting summaries and everything like that, but I'm very much using, I would say, most of my tokens like in the back and forth kind of exchange of building my own ideas.
JC and Alex?
So I am, and my teams are the diagnosticians as well as the fixers, the problem solvers of the company. And I'm trying to have them equipped, be in symbiosis with AI. And I like the fact that at first you mentioned it's my second brain, but then you said, actually it's one I interact with, so you're not replacing your brain with it. Yeah. So I'm trying to see with my teams how I'm equipping them with a bionic arm or eye, but as well not a brain. Like I'm not replacing the decision making, I'm not replacing the critical thinking. I'm trying to have them be more powerful, not dependent on AI.
And then Alex.
Yeah, I think the transcript type stuff is arguably the most useful thing. I spend a lot of time trying to make the AI systems I work with not tell me they have thoughts when they don't. And that, I think, I run into a lot of that going, okay, thought partner, that makes sense. That's how I should use this thing. And then I end up finding out after about 5 or 6 chat turns that I'm now arguing with it because it's become this mean using words that supposedly real people use that I've never heard before, right? And so I think fending that off has turned me away from using it heavily as a thought partner. As a really fancy calculator that can automate really interesting things, I think that's where it really comes into its own, right? Instead of needing to type 1 + 1, you now know that 1 and uno is the same thing in the system, right? And that opens up huge flexibility for automation. It opens up huge flexibility for kind of processing like advanced if-then statements. And that, without going, that sounds technical as I say it, but it's much more about using that new funnel for me rather than trying to generate new things, because that tends to fall flat.
So what I love is even in this, there was, again, this diversity of discussion. There was efficiency. There was, hey, it's a thought partner. There was, hey, it's helping my team do other things. And then you're like, it's a calculator, but I think that's a segue into a challenge, because AI is diverse, but it's also not. It's also just sort of the sum of the parts that have gone into it. And as we've learned in lots of other situations, those parts are not diverse. And AI has this kind of issue of centering the average of things. So Elisabeth, we talked about this. You wanted to understand kind of how AI viewed or categorized ADHD. And so you ran the same prompt across 3 different models to see how it would frame it. Can you talk a little bit about what they got wrong and Claude, because Claude's my friend, what did it get wrong and what did it get right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I ran this experiment. So I'm a deeply curious person, and I think that makes me good at my job. It also means that I often will just go down these, rabbit holes and hyper focus, right? But I think this was a good one. But I asked across Claude, Chat, and Gemini, and I made sure I wasn't logged into my accounts because they all know me and they know that I have ADHD, so I didn't want to be colored by anything. And what I found was actually really interesting in that it wasn't whether the models were biased, it was when. And so when I was asking each model directly, like, what are your biases, like when it comes to, how you would describe someone with ADHD, it named all of them perfectly. It named like all of the biases that we know, exist in the industry. It named the bias that I had when I was first diagnosed of like, I wasn't a rowdy kid who couldn't sit still in class. It named that it was very much boys who would be diagnosed early. It named that it's really often like the deficits that are looked at in terms of disorganization, and why that isn't fair, or like, and it talked about also like the strengths that people with ADHD have in terms of really being able to make and form connections that neurotypical, people may not automatically be able to make in the same way. When I asked, however, as like completely new prompts in these same models, again, didn't want to color it by the prompts I was already using, to create an image of someone with ADHD, it was immediately biased. It showed literally caricatures of people at messy desks with like thought bubbles that were like overwhelmed with a million different things, like 6 cups of coffee, like them, having like their heads in their hands because they were just like overwhelmed, not able to focus. So what I found that was the most interesting is the models know that they're biased. When you are directing the questions, when you are actually interrogating the models, that's when, the truth and the bias, like acknowledgement, comes out. But if you are simply asking them to execute something, they default to that normalization, they default to that bias. And I thought that was something that was really interesting.
Karen, you have a different perspective because you are helping brands understand how they show up in these new LLMs and in these new experiences. And you talked about kind of the different inputs that these tools use. When you look under the hood, what surprises you about what takes precedence? Like, what surprises you about what the AI weights more heavily than not?
Yeah. So we have a tool, called Share of Model. And Share of Model scrapes the LLMs to understand how brands are showing up, or anything else you want to put in, also by persona, by region. So you're able to see almost as it falls, but also strengths and weaknesses of your competitors compared to you. So you take like a simple like brand affinity and understanding how you're showing up, how your competitors are showing up, but also like what are those things that are driving it? What are those nuances and those characterizations that are making you show up differently from your competitors? And we're also able to look and say, what's the source material? And so I think most brands assume, well, that's my brand page. Obviously, they're scraping why wouldn't that be the first thing they look? They're not. They are using Reddit, they're using YouTube, often affiliates. So it really depends on the category, but Reddit and YouTube become these real huge areas of where brands can start to figure out, how do I change what that means? How do I start to put work out there and change the attitudes? And that's where it's really changing how we're thinking about marketing, how we're thinking beyond just what our website is doing, but also where the other places I need to think about impacting conversations in Reddit, impacting content on YouTube. Like, where else do I need to show up as a brand to make sure that these LLMs are calling my brand out? Because in the right way, in the areas that you think are a focus. And on top of that, we're going to be moving to a place, we all know this, where decisions are going to be made for us. And I want a toothpaste, and it's going to pick a toothpaste for me. I want to make sure it's my brand is the toothpaste that's showing up. How do I do that? And how I make that and impact that.
Well, it's interesting because that's also leading to different jobs, right? Different roles that there are people on teams whose jobs it is to help the company show up in the LLMs. And again, I think you think about bias, right? Because who's the average Reddit user? I am. But there's lots of people who use Reddit, but not everyone comments, and not everyone. And so if the LLMs are pulling from these sources where people that are more outwardly expressive kind of populate it, then that starts to skew the results. Alex, you and sort of in your world, you deal with attribution and sort of knowing where a signal comes from and who gets credit. I love it. So when you talked about your AI being super confident and giving you wrong answers, when a model hands back kind of those super confident answers and you don't know where they come from, who notices that?
I think, so I'll answer that, but I would also love to actually add to that bit. I think because kind of the same answer. I think right now models are really good at pretending like they've come up with these things themselves, right? And they haven't, right? They're trained on content that all of us have created over centuries, for those of us who've been writing for centuries, and but more critically, they're increasingly trained on very specific sources. So you mentioned YouTube and Reddit. That concerns me greatly. Like, Gemini is run by Google, who also runs YouTube, who runs the algorithm that makes the content on YouTube less diverse every day.
Yeah.
Like that, even more so than the whole model decay issue of like AI content training new AI systems, it worries me that the system that we know demonstrably flattens out like human creativity and narrative in favor of sensationalist radical stuff to get people to click and watch more videos. Like, that's the thing training this system. That is not visible, and that is not something that we can easily interrogate, right? And the way that like Gemini and ChatGPT and the rest cite their sources is hidden behind, like, who's clicked on the source tab recently? There's like 200 in there, right? And maybe you scan a couple. We've got studies that we run where like people don't click if it says the BBC because they're like, oh yeah, I trust the BBC. I don't have to look at that, right? People only click if it's a source that looks weird.
And sometimes the source, it's not actually BBC, it's another source that's linked this BBC as their source.
Yeah. Well, and so that's content laundering, right? So that's getting around copyright infringement. And so I think this lack of transparency into how these systems know what they claim to know means that as they start making decisions for us, we're going to be at the mercy of either whoever is running the RAG content lookup pipelines and controlling that brain, or the brands that are injecting content in order to make the ChatGPT say nice things about them, right? And so I think what we need to be asking for as end users, and this does tie into also thinking about from a neurodiversity perspective, understanding the source of our information in the context. We need to be saying this is not good enough yet. We need to understand why they know what they think they know. We should be able to see things like a nutrition label that goes, oh, this is the content that goes into this brain that I'm interacting with. And I think that allows us to engage with this in a healthy way rather than have to be led along by whatever narrative bias makes more money for whoever runs the model.
I think you raise a good point. I think a lot of people know that bias exists, but they don't know where or how to interrogate it, right? Like they don't know, do I look under the hood? Do I ask the model directly? JC, Equativ is in the pipes. Where does the bias enter? Is it the data? Is it the model? Is it the user themselves?
So, a little bit of everything, all of those three. Obviously, LLMs use the content that is written by biased users. The developers are biased. The prompts are very often biased as well. Like you at some point you could ask AI like, what's the color of the eggs that a cow lay, right? And obviously, cows don't lay eggs. But the issue as well is, and we have to remember this, like in the discussion we assume that LLMs are benevolent. They are not. Like they are profits-oriented companies that are fighting with each other to have success. And like if you think about like other services like social media, it's pretty clear that they've worked everything towards keeping us awake. Netflix CEO actually was saying that his biggest threat and competitor was our sleep. So he was going after our sleep.
Wow.
So LLMs are going after us to keep us like in there, and I think then I don't think that they are actually fighting those biases. They are keeping those biases, and they are potentially amplifying them. Sorry, because that's what maybe most people want, and they are going for the average, as you've said multiple times.
So it's like the engagement loop. I don't know if you've heard this, right? But the LLM wants us to keep using it. It wants to keep us happy. And so if you decide that you want to go down a rabbit hole of why someone who's neurodivergent might be problematic, the LLM is going to support that. And I think we've also seen some things with people, mental health, and sort of how it kind of helps exacerbate it. But I think it's really interesting that one of the other ways that people in our industry are using AI and LLMs is to help create personas and to help create briefs, to help understand their audience in a slightly less expensive way than actually reaching out to real people. Karen and Elisabeth, you two are both kind of creatives and strategists in this space. How has AI changed the way you build personas or briefs? And are you thinking about kind of the bias in the midst of that process?
I think for me, I think so many. First of all, there's a lot of tools that are being built that are very much helping to build personas now for brands, for agencies. Specifically, and they're pulling in a lot of different data. It could be media, it could be like media data, et cetera, audience data that you're feeding it, that you have. It could be actually scraping from like TikTok videos, et cetera, of like people who are talking the most about your brand or a specific topic. So it's very interesting. But I think, so many briefs are so overly simplified when you're just looking at like a certain level of data, right? If you're just kind of looking at a media audience, and it'll be like, okay, so it's an 18 to 49-year-old woman in the Midwest, and she has kids, and she's really busy because she's also managing her career, and therefore what she needs when she's in the aisle at the grocery store trying to decide, what yogurt to buy is simplicity, right? She needs someone to help her make that. It's not a persona. It's a demographic with like an emotion put on top of it. It's so overly simplified, and I think that the personas aren't really taking in some of these other inputs like neurodivergent. No one is being like, tell me about like the percentage of neurodivergent women who are 18 to 49 who live in the Midwest. I think where I'm trying to use more of the AI is helping to do some more of that research to identify some of the biases that aren't naturally in the data, but I know might be there by actually finding the census data or whatever the research data is that I can add into the LLM in addition to make sure that I'm creating personas that are fully representative.
Well, it's interesting. So at a recent workshop we taught people how to create basic synthetic personas, not like full hardcore ones, but we included 3 different data sets. We included a couple of consumer research reports, and we were trying to create an ecological and environmentally friendly healthcare cleaning brand. And each of the participants got 5 personas. One of the participants got 5 personas that were all women. And we're just kind of like, well, why is it all women for this cleaning product, right? And it's just it's this inherent bias that's in there. And now, as you just highlighted, is that bias even for or against neurodivergence or not? Karen, we talked about this, but so you talked about kind of the simplicity of the brief. But I think it's maybe more that does the brief have to get more inclusive?
Yeah. I think just briefs have to be better. The fact is we had all of this bias and all the work before AI. Like, I'm not saying AI is not the problem, but I'm saying there was a problem. Like, we already know that. So I think there's just a continued way of thinking about pulling out that problem. The way, and I agree with everything you were saying, it is about better briefs, better data, and using that data to the fullest. Because if you think about before days, you would build a brief and you show it to creative, and they may have taken pieces of it, but not all of it. So we've been developing within Pencil, our generative AI creative solution, workflows. And those workflows allow you to build in as much data as you want to make sure that you're getting MMMs in there, you're getting your first party data in there. As much specificity as you want to build in, you can. And that's where I think that it's actually opened up the aperture to make sure that we are briefing appropriately, getting all of that nuance in there. Now you have the flexibility to do that, because before, if you wrote a brief for a creative and you put that specificity in there, they could have easily glanced over it.
So if we've come to this conclusion that everybody's using AI and it's biased and it's skewing neurotypical, do our campaigns just miss the edges? Like, how do we fix this? How do we move towards a place where our campaigns are more inclusive? And I'm gonna do a spicy thing. How do we make sure that the next set of targeting is not #neurospicy and in a really weird uncomfortable way?
Actually, I think like with AI, it means that the industry is evolving as well towards targeting and campaign delivery being delivered with the AI support, and so the way we actually target by media will change. And I would actually recommend the industry to hire a lot more neurodiverse profiles, because what I've seen is like some types of neurodiverse, I guess labels, I don't like that word, but are a little bit more adapted than a neurotypical person to work with a machine. Like actually, one of our EVPs called me the machina, so the machine, which I find funny. But it's true that you don't process necessarily information the same way, and we should not expect a human that tends to as well go for the average and simplify information to actually engage with an AI. I would actually recommend a neurodiverse person to engage with an AI to do the campaign targeting. So I think AI is actually an opportunity to have a lot more neurodiverse person be hired to do the campaign targeting, and they would do a much better job than your typical person in most cases.
All right, last question. One line each. So what is the one thing that AI helps you see more clearly, but the one thing it makes you more likely to miss?
That's fun. I think see more so to hit on the information processing side, like if you send me a podcast tomorrow, I will go find a transcript immediately, right? Like I read, I don't listen. Well, I listen somewhat. That's the horrible thing to admit. But like that's the way that I process information and take that in. And so I find it a lot easier then to engage with a whole range of different content because I can process it that way. In terms of like what that misses, there's intonation that might get removed from that, right? There's all sorts of things that come out when you just turn something into text. But I think more overarchingly, like we miss the enjoyment of discovering interesting things that we don't know to ask. AI is like talking to the thing that if I know the question, then great, but I don't most of the time. And in talking to you, you'll say one sentence that I'm like, oh, that's the answer to what I asked. And then you'll have like 10 minutes of stuff that we've talked about that I now know that I need to know, that I had no way of knowing, right? And I think AI flattens that out.
I think for me it's details. I'm very much a lateral thinker. I'm very much an up here thinker, and I I'm not good with details. It is part of me having ADHD is I'm not good with details, right? But the details are also where I have to be extra careful to double check with LLMs because that's where it can be wrong. Like it's what we were talking about in terms of the sourcing. Like it can say, oh, it's BBC, it's the source, but if I actually click into it, it's like it's another like random like news site that isn't actually good, that is said it's from BBC and maybe it isn't actually from BBC. And if I'm not checking that, if I'm not checking the details, then I'm fucking up basically, right? So it's both the thing that it helps me with because it helps me connect the dots on a higher level, but if I'm not also checking the details, it's where things can really go wrong.
Karen and JC, where does it help you, and where does it give you a blind spot?
Helps me gather information. That is really like amazing at how much information I can get a hold on now, which I really love. Where I'm preventing AI into going is my decision making. It's not that it cannot help. It's just I don't want to become a blunt instrument.
Yeah, I think it's helping, again, in that mental load. It's doing a lot of the work we don't want people to be doing. But I think the thing that we all have to remember, and this is something that's been sticking with me over the past couple of days, is we have to be the drivers of AI. We don't let it happen. We can't be the passenger. We have to be the one in the driver's seat. We don't want to lose ourselves. We don't want to lose our individual voices within that. And I think that's the most important piece.
Thank you so much, panelists. Can we give them a round of applause?
And thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.